are live.
Great. Good morning, everyone. On behalf of Macmillan Education, I, Vandana Juneja, extend a warm welcome to the panelists, educators, and others joining the session on Facebook. We requested all teachers who are joining the Zoom session to please join us on Facebook. Macmillan Education has been in the Indian education space for over 127 years, and our rich legacy is based on the relationships that we've built. As for any other organization, these relationships are with people who really matter to us. They are with institutions, authors, and our teachers. We've always been at the forefront in supporting the fraternity, and today's panel discussion is another such step. I would request our Managing Director, Mr. Rajesh Basari, to please open the discussion.
Thanks, Vandana. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this panel discussion by Macmillan Education. We are committed to advancing learning all over the world and are saddened by the impact of the COVID pandemic on formal schooling. To understand how momentous it is, as per UNESCO, over 1 billion children in the world, which is around 62% of all enrolled, are out of school at this time, and education has closed in 123 countries. However, every major crisis brings with it an opportunity to reimagine a new way forward. I thank Dr. Farooq Fasil, Ms. Sonal Pinto, Dr. Neelam Kaur, and Mr. Roshan Gandhi, who have joined us today to share their perspective on academic, societal, and commercial factors impacting the roadmap for K-12 education. Over to Vandana. Thanks.
So before we begin, I'll just set the context. It's been a rough couple of months for education. Like Rajesh said, 1 billion students all over the world are out of it. And in India, that we have almost 30% of that. So 300 million children are out of schools and colleges. But the good news is that their learning continued. And I would begin the session by congratulating all school owners, trustees, coordinators, and most importantly, the teachers, the rock stars, who overnight learned online tools, starting with Zoom, MS Classroom, MS, Teams, Google Classrooms, Crayon, Seesaw, and so many others, put together the content required, developed assessments, and smilingly engaged with their precious students to continue teaching them. Thank you, teachers. Kudos to you. So what is the thought behind today's topic of reimagining school education for change schools in the new normal? I would say it's a quote that I read by somebody not very well known. He's the CEO of Learn, and his name is Dov Seidman. He says, when you press the pause button on machines, they stop. But when you press the pause button on human beings, they start. They start to reflect, they start to rethink, they start to reimagine what is possible today. And that is what we are going to do here. So let me go ahead and introduce our illustrious panel to you. Our first panelist is a visionary in education, Dr. Farooq Fasil, the Global Head of Affordable Schools for GEMS Education. With over 33 years of involvement in education, Dr. Fasil, a doctorate in education, has been the secretary of the CBSE Gulf Council from 2001-2, the chairman from 2002-3, and the chairman of the sports committee in the year 2004-5. He has also been a part of the CBSE affiliation committee and an advisor to various institutions over his tenure. Proudly, he's been honored with the prestigious National Teacher Award in the year 2005, where he received the award from Mr. APJ Kalam, which was the National Teacher Award. He has also been a member of the CBSE Committee for Promotion of CBSE Overseas. Dr. Fasil, very importantly, is known for his humility and compassion and has worked extensively towards not just transformative, but also inclusive education. Dr. Fasil, we are honored to have you on the panel.
Thank you.
Our next panelist is a brand by herself in India. Ms. Sonal Pinto, director at the Ryan International Group of Institutions, one of the largest privately held K-12 chain of schools in India. Ms. Sonal Pinto is a postgraduate in education management and holds a diploma in early childhood teacher education. As a seasoned educator, she has extensive experience of over 20 years in the area of curriculum and assessment design and management across various boards of affiliation. She is relentlessly evolving the curriculum design for the Ryan Group for it to reach new heights and achieve excellence in education. Thank you, ma'am, for taking time to join us today.
Thank you very much.
And our next panelist is the highly respected and elusive Dr. Neelam Kaur, Advisor Health and Education to the Kalgidhar Trust Akal Academy, Himachal Pradesh. And from personal experience, Dr. Neelam, I have waited one day to meet you outside your office. But in the beautiful location of Baru Sahib, it was a pleasure. The Kalgidhar Trust started its first school in 1987 with 6 students and has blossomed in 3 decades into a network of 130 schools and 2 universities with over 70,000 students in 5 North Indian states. And the significant part is that many of them are in deep rural pockets where education is so badly needed. Dr. Neelam has been volunteering at the Akal Academy, Baru Sahib, for the last 25 years under the spiritual guidance of Reverend Saint Iqbal Singh Ji, the president of the Kalgidhar Trust. The mission statement of the trust is to reboot education by blending modern scientific education with spiritual rejuvenation. Thank you, ma'am. Our 4th panelist is a known name in EdTech, very young and very well qualified, Mr. Roshan Gandhi, the Director of Strategy at City Montessori School, Lucknow, with 57,000 students across 18 campuses. Bringing international experience as a graduate of the University of Oxford and an MBA in Educational Leadership from University College London, he has worked in and continues to consult for multiple educational technology companies. Mr. Roshan is also, by passion, a certified career counselor. He is leading innovation through integration of EdTech, new methods for character education, data-driven target setting, which is so important, and more across all CMS schools to take it to new heights in the future. Thank you, Roshan, for being with us today.
Thank you.
You would have seen the diversity of this panel, from global education to people spearheading education in the interiors, to EdTech background, to the spirituality which they're all bringing here. And that is a true reflection of the diversity of the K-12 system in India. So without much ado now, I'll hand over to Dr. Vasil to kick off the session, talking about how the GEMS handled the pandemic impact on education in the entire MENA region and India, of course. Over to you, Dr. Vasil.
Thank you for the invite, and I'm sure that it's going to be a great learning experience sharing the panel with some of the most respected names. I'm sure that in Minasa, if you look at it, the government initiatives in terms of technological integration into school education has been started early. I mean, almost it's a decade now, you know, where governments have regulated the environment in some ways. So that has definitely helped them in this present crisis. Having said that, while it has bailed them out through this crisis, that does not take away the fact that we are not totally integrated. You know, schools have their challenges. However, as a company, our company, we have invested hugely in terms of, you know, in this platform and employed some of the best brains to define the futuristic models of education. I think every chain of school has reacted in a manner where the expertise is and the resource pool is. And chains have done definitely better than the solo or individual schools. Having said that, I think COVID is going to provide an exceptional opportunity to change up the schools, to redefine the educational landscape and ecosystem. They have to be the change agents, you know, and they have to be a little more rebellious in terms of taking this forward, because you will have resistance. Like if you look at today, MHRD saying, you know, for the primary classes in some of the states, they have said no online teaching and learning. So you will have these roadblocks, but the fact is, since chains have the bandwidth and the ability and the mandate on their own to create this ecosystem where technology becomes the centerpiece of educational transaction, I think it's an opportunity, and depends upon how visionary the leadership within the changes and accept this reality of life. See, educational models around the globe will be disrupted and are being disrupted. You know, it's a question of where we are at this point in time. Our sense of change is late, although we have been speaking about this change for quite some time. Actually, you will find that a lot of educators keep speaking about the shifts that have taken place in the education landscape, from student centric, teacher centric to student centric, from product to process, the integration of ICT, the cultural context of learning, talking about learning space and not classroom particular. These have been in discussion for quite some time, but the reality of adopting towards this change has been very, very slow. The response has been very slow. I think COVID is one such opportunity where the change must rethink and reimagine education in future. Because if you look at the changing world of the work, it's going to be disruption everywhere. We're going to be products and services will be disrupted. Labor markets will be disrupted. Skill sets will be challenged. Business models and industries. The fight between the man and the machine will intensify, whether we like it or not. So this intense fight is going to compel us. You see, I keep saying it. I like this, statement all the time, that either you disrupt the environment or be disrupted. So should you wait for disruptions to happen, or you are in anticipation of what future is going to be like? Technology will not only change the things, the way we do the things, but it will also change the ways we think about future. So therefore, I think one is the change their own personal mandate. And I strongly believe that learning is inherently a collaborative activity. It's a relationship-based enterprise. So therefore, the change must now get out of this silo mindset where we want to, prove ourselves we are better than the other. I think that collaboration needs to come into play, because it's about educating children, it's about educating generations, it's about bringing in the change, it's about shaping the destiny. So therefore, we cannot remain siloed. So we have to have that relationship-based enterprise. The change must come together. They must collaborate. They must research, because this will help them. Because together, no man is an island by itself. It is the collective wisdom. It is the, harvesting that collective genius that will help us to take education to the next level. Because in India, you must understand, and across in many countries, the accountability with the governments and the state is missing when it comes to learning outcomes of the children. I mean, if the government today gives you a diktat, say that no online learning for primary school, you must understand how regressive this thought will be. Let's say COVID, how it is going to redefine schools. Tomorrow, when children come back to schools, it will not be a school as normal. They will find a different school. Children will be wearing the mask. There will be a lot of sanitization and health provisions being, arranged. Children will not have a physical play, but they may have it may be half of the student population. You may have staggered, school timings. You may divide class into two and have them different timings to attend because of the sheer number and the kind of protocols we have to observe. So schools will not be normal post-COVID. And this is going to be a reality forever to come, because we will have these disruptions coming in one form or the other. Therefore, not to be surprised and not to be taken off guard, I think the change must develop their internal reflection and a feedback how to take education to the next level, how to redefine this educational landscape, how to reimagine the K-12 education. One, and they must also take this mandate now to become inherently more collaborative and relationship based, so that at the end of the day, you see, the kingpin of this whole relationship is the child. He's going to benefit. So there are many things which are going to happen out of this post-COVID school management, managing learning and teaching in the classrooms, and behaviors, relationships. They will be redefined in many ways. I think that will be an opening thought, and let's hear.
Wonderful. Thank you. So Dr. Neelam, may we hear from you now on what to think about it.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Wassel, for sharing, giving a beautiful, you said something about collaboration and man and machine. The conflict between man and machine is going to intensify. And thank you, of course, Vandana, for introducing us all. If I give you a little history of what Akal Academies are, Akal Academy is a chain of schools which are established only in the rural, the northern India. So we have, like Vandana said, we started in 1987 with the 6 students, and today we have these 130 schools spread over 5 states. No, the principally we do not start a school in a urban setup. So we have, this is a mandate which is given by the founding saint. And if we little bit look back, so it was in 1900, around 1910, when Saint Atar Singh Ji Maharaj, who himself was not educated, but he laid the foundation of the first girls' school in Sangrur, Punjab. So from where the whole story begins. And I will quickly take you along like what we did in these last 3 months, where the schools are in remote and the corners, and we have no connectivity is a challenge. And then our children are from, some of the children are from marginalized families and compromised background. So I'll just take you a small slideshow for 2 minutes and just take you over what happened starting from 24th of March. Yeah. So Akal Academy, Baru Sahib is the flagship school of this 130 Akal Academies and 70,000 students. And we also have on our campus Eternal University, a multidisciplinary university. So when on 24th March, this was the call which was taken by the management that we have to remain connected to our rural masses, because this is the time we need to hold them, because their morale is very, very important for all the development which is going to take place. So we started with the online teaching, and it was just like we were not even fully furnished with and fully equipped with all the tools, but the principals, the 130 principals, they took a call upon themselves and started doing it in their own small ways, through the video lessons, through the YouTube, and through Zoom. So this is how it started. And now it is still continuing the online classes, and it has been done for the last all these 2 months. And then we started to make it the whole, the teaching more like comprehensive and holistic. So to build in a little bit of international mindedness, to give them that social and emotional well-being. So we integrated a lot of activities in their daily routine. Like we made them have this online competitions on Family Day, the International Labor Day, the Red Cross, so that they remain connected to what's happening around the globe. And they are able to understand the pain and the suffering and maybe the opportunities, whatever are there, the strengths as well as the limitations. And then as we went on, then we realized that our teachers need to learn how to lead a virtual classroom. So then we started with our online teacher trainings, and almost like our 4,700 teachers, they took this online training, and which was like more than 50 sessions, webinars were held by people like Vandana and the leaders, the educational leaders, and to make them little stable. And so we integrated social emotional learning also. Initiated something like a kindness tree, the mood meter, so that the children and the parents, they together remain emotionally resilient as well, because this is a testing time for everyone. So because of the loss of economy, the financial pressure is on, and so it has to be very, very important for each one of us to understand how I understand my own self and how I relate it to the surroundings. So we thought it was important to build in those activities, and we worked with the parents as well. And it was very heartening to see that the parents were with us. Like, this was the first time the parents who were illiterate, they were sitting by the side of the student and helping him to learn the lesson. So the desire to learn was intense, and the learning outcomes were more than what we would expect in face-to-face. Maybe it was something new, or maybe the parents were free, they could focus on their children at this time, but it was a rewarding experience. And this is all the professional development, the various subjects, and where we also included the safety of the child, because the safety of this child in this critical time is very important. The child abuse is on the rise. So how to make the parents understand those issues, like how to prepare them and see that, like, this ventilation or the catharsis which the child was earlier doing when he was coming to the school, now that has to be done by the parent, and he has to understand, maybe when the families are staying together, there can be an element of child abuse also. So we also conducted sessions on that. And then we thought, if this whole cycle can only be completed if we have some kind of assessment. No, it was a big, it was a big sort of an call, or it was kind of, we could never even really plan that, but it just happened. So we started with a mock test for 20,000 students, and then about 47,000 students, they attended this assessment test. So we gave them the assessments for languages, English, Punjabi, Hindi, science, social studies, maths. So most of them were MCQ based. And for written task, it was like they were supposed to write a paragraph, and the teachers corrected it, shared with the parents. So it was quite an intensive thing, and the parents largely appreciated that. So they gave us a good feedback. Yeah, because everyone understands the challenges of being in an area which is a deep, like a desert area, Rajasthan, Ganganagar, or in Haryana, or in Himachal or UP. So we are not near the cities where the children has an access to a lot of this thing, online education. And then another thing, which is our core, like as Vandana explained in the beginning. So our system is the blend of the modern education with the spiritual rejuvenation. So we start our day with a prayer or a meditation or mindfulness session. So we continued that during these days. So all the parents also participated in that, the children participated. So they started their day reading the spiritual scriptures, and so this was part of it. And not only they were doing that, but they were also praying for the well-being of their families and world at large. So they were trying, that is the prophecy of like founding saints and Guru Nanak, like you have to also seek the well-being of others. So this was the time and opportunity which we got, like to make the parents take a very, very positive role in this teaching learning process, and as well as building the emotional resilience or the spiritual component in the students. And this, they also like started doing something like a small acts of sharing and giving, like the children who did not have an access to or maybe a mobile phone. So they will go to the neighborhood school, a neighborhood, and then they will share their maybe a mobile with the other students, and so the neighborhood, so that they can also benefit. So it was a beautiful feeling and experience which we had. And despite the fact that the fee collection remained a challenge, and it's still a challenge, but we are still committed, and we are carrying on with all our teachers who have been really very, very kind, and they have been very understanding with all what has been, we have been doing that. And before, I would say that the holistic education will not be complete if we only build up the intelligence quotient of the child, until and unless we have to build his emotional well-being, his emotional resilience, his spiritual intelligence as well, because that makes the man complete. And that's the call also of the time. Like we have to tell our child how he can preserve himself, because once he preserves himself, his mentality, his inner peace, then only he's able to survive this crisis. So that, and I think this was the best time to exhibit that, and for the people to understand that. Because some of the people thought it to be like conservative or backward to integrate spirituality into the teaching. But I think this platform gave us a lot of acknowledgement, like the children were more peaceful, they were little like thoughtful, they were little, they were kind to themselves, to the others. So we could have very positive outcomes of this integration. And this has been our combination right now, like over the years. It's almost our journeys of 30 years. And that's what we have always kept, this integration. Like this is this is our model. Like it's not only IQ, it is more important to have the holistic development of the child. And of course, the flip side of the technology, as even Dr. Wasil said, the flip side is because the human touch is not possible now. The teacher who is supposed to have that connection, that is not possible. So that's the flip side. Maybe the positive things are there, because the man, like he said, machine cannot make man. Man has to be made by a teacher who is the one who's enriching his life, his lessons, through the integration of human values, the life skills, the culture. So the teacher remains the core of this process. And we will have to have a future where we have the hybrid schools, or we have the schools, we do even the homeschooling, but the teacher will remain the kingpin in this process. And with maybe this, when we reopen the school, like some of the nations, they did that. New Zealand started that, Denmark started that. So they started with like a small experiment, a small bubble where maybe one teacher, 10 students, and maybe a staggered, having only 10 students coming one time. And the different countries, they tried different models, because everyone understands that it's the teacher who drives the true learning. The experiential learning cannot happen until and unless a teacher is there. The child experiences himself something, the application, the experiments, the other things. So for that, I think we will have to have some kind of blended learning, whatever we call, where we give due respect to the teacher. So yes. Hello.
Thank you. Yes, we could hear you. Thank you very much. I think two very important facets that you highlighted. One on the involvement of the parent, and of course the emotional resilience. Could I now request Sonal ma'am to share her experience with us, which was largely, I think, the tier 1 and tier 2 cities, and some in the interior as well. Over to you, Sonal ma'am.
Thank you very much, Vandana. Before I start, I would want to give thanks to and say thank you to our Lord Jesus for giving us the gift of life, and also for giving me this opportunity to be on this platform with the other eminent speakers. While we are all aware, the COVID-19 pandemic has affected us largely, and school closures impact not only students, teachers, and families, but far-reaching economic and societal consequences. School closures in response to the pandemic have shed light on various social and economic issues, including student debt, digital learning, food insecurity, homelessness, as well as childcare, healthcare, housing, internet, and disability services. The impact was most severe for disadvantaged children and their families, causing interrupted learning, compromised nutrition, childcare problems, and consequent economic cost to families who could not work. Now, when we look at the impact, what it has been for the Indian K-12 education system, we can broadly classify them as one, student and parents. The learning disruption caused by shutdown, particularly young learners in crucial early formative years. The lack of familiarity with the online learning, the lack of experience in remote learning, including inadequate resources to support it, reduced economic ability to pay fees, therefore impacting access to learning tools. Second, being the education providers, the lack of preparedness to bring the cohort learning and teacher training, the limited online channels to communicate, managing funds due to low fee collection, thereby impacting ability to continuously develop and provide content. We believe that an integrated and comprehensive approach should be adopted to manage this crisis, which rightly Dr. Neelam and Dr. Vasil have highlighted. It has to be an integrated learning for a holistic development of a child. It is important also to relook or reconsider the pedagogy. A seamless integrating classroom, learning with e-mode will have a huge impact on the online education experience. While the standard operating procedure for reopening of school is still being defined, it will be a daunting task for all school leaders across in terms of logistical challenge, the planning, such as social distancing, staggered school timings, alternate school working days, readjusting school calendars, events, health and hygiene, safety protocols, mental and emotional well-being of students. At RIMES, we have, just about when the lockdown was announced, and while we already have our learning management system in place, what we did was we immediately started in equipping and training our teachers because they need to be trained first. And we introduced the live and the online remote learning, screen share facilities for students and digital smart boards for teachers. And we believe that the way forward, first and foremost, we will have to prioritize health and safety, develop a robust SOP, the standing operating procedure on the exit lockdown strategy, which needs to be showcased to parents and students is very key. Increase government intervention on revitalizing the economy, which will lead to a faster stabilization of the current economic conditions, thereby creating a positive environment for higher fee collection. The traditional offline learning was always counterbalanced by online modes to some extent. We see a higher growth for sure towards the online education across the board after the pandemic subsides. But however, we still continue to believe that in-person aspect of learning cannot be replaced by the online learning. And I think has established chain of schools, this crisis definitely, the schools across will focus on the innovation in leveraging technology, active collaboration, capacity building to make teaching learning relevant. Schools are also going to make an effort to be on e-learning platforms, which is going to be the next immediate requirement. And while they do that, building an ecosystem, the e-learning ecosystem, will be of importance. And I think it will definitely be a top priority as well for the K-12 sector. The other thing is the blended learning model of merging classroom engagement with e-learning support will enrich the teaching learning experience. And I believe while community of educators and school leaders move ahead in adapting to this new normal, there will be several challenges that will have to be addressed. One being possibility of the widening gaps between the haves and the have-nots in the learning outcomes because of lack of infrastructure, something basic, and facilities in the rural areas. the e-learning ecosystem, I believe, will hopefully provide a viable plan to bridge this divide. Second being the challenge of training the educators across the rural-urban spectrum on the emerging technologies will be a continuing issue. But I believe that we believe that teachers are lifelong learners. And we're hoping that they will stay ahead of the learning curve. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonal ma'am, especially on that point where we cannot afford to have another divide between the students basis the digital infrastructure that they have and they don't have. So over to Mr. Roshan Gandhi now.
Hi, well, thank you so much, Vandana, and to Macmillan for kindly inviting me. And I have the great advantage of speaking last because I've had the pleasure of hearing the wonderful insights from Dr. Vasil, Dr. Neelam, and Ms. Sonal. So a lot of fascinating work going on there, and I would just add a few things about the experience that we had at City Montessori School. Of course, as was the case for everyone, this lockdown kind of hit us by surprise. It all happened in a great hurry. But a few days before the lockdown, we did anticipate that something like this was likely to happen. And we very rapidly used those days to do intense training. So even when the schools were still technically open, since we thought that they were about to close, we stopped calling the students and just called the teachers for some intensive training in using technological platforms to conduct online learning. And of course, that training was not in a silo. I think the fact that the teachers have been able to adapt very quickly is also because there has been an ongoing program of IT training for teachers for several years now in CMS. So they've been building up their knowledge and their practice for many years, and they were very, at this point, tech savvy, computer ready, literate, and ready and willing to make this switch to online teaching very rapidly. So on the technological front, they moved very quickly. And on the pedagogical front, it's of course been an evolving process. And I think one of our biggest advantages as a school chain is our distributed system and the fact that so many educational leaders across our system have been implementing new ideas and experimenting and then sharing those ideas with everyone else. So I think that the access to knowledge sharing that we've had has been a great boon because nobody had all the answers in the beginning. There is no established best practice anywhere in the world for conducting really good online teaching. It's been an evolving process. And so that ability to experiment and then share ideas and try different experiments has been extremely powerful, especially as we have quite a diverse range of demographic across our school campuses. All our schools are in the city of Lucknow, but Lucknow is a very varied city. So we have some schools in the very wealthy part of town and some schools in the less well-to-do part of town. Where children have less access to devices in their home, less reliable internet connections. And especially there, the pedagogy has really evolved to emphasize asynchronous learning much more than synchronous learning. So rather than just trying to mirror the school timetable online and trying to follow the same lesson pattern, we've been emphasizing much more project-based learning, giving students a chance to conduct research, more blended learning and more flipped learning where the students are learning a topic in their own time and then bringing it back to the class. We found that these classes have been really important, not just to keep students learning going, not just to keep them learning and prevent their learning loss, but also actually as a means to protect their well-being. I think this has been a really tough and time for everyone. It's caused a lot of anxiety amongst students. And I think giving them a sense of routine, structure, a grounding has been very important for them. And so has the fact that we've been able to give them a sense of community by keeping them engaged with their classes. So this has been the case for all levels, but particularly for the younger students, it's been really important to give them that engagement. And I think the parents have really appreciated that. I think the pre-primary students have they've done a lot of, we've given them a lot of craft work, which they've been able to do along with their parents in the home and then come back to the class and present to the class. So it's been an opportunity to develop other skills, which sometimes we don't focus on necessarily in the classroom. So all of that has come to the front. And apart from that, I think the parents have been very happy to see that we've been able to engage students in different kinds of assessment, evolve our own way of administering assessments through different kinds of online platforms, and generally just evolve the way that we do schooling to keep children learning, keep them engaged, but also not put too much pressure on them and not overload them with too much screen time. So it's been a great learning opportunity for all of us, and I think it's an opportunity to keep some of these learnings about how we do pedagogy, even when things return back to normal. We've proven that teachers can keep adapting very quickly and learning new things very quickly. We've proven the power of technology in a lot of different ways, and we've proven that a lot of different methodologies, such as project-based learning and flipped learning, are very effective and can continue even when things return to normal.
Moving beyond, this understanding of how to transact, learning and teaching our curriculum, we need to understand that future has no precedent and future is no more the function of past. Education is changing. The world is your classroom and learning is lifelong. And lifelong learning will be the greatest growth industry of the world now. So the change, in fact, should rethink education and move beyond the contours of curriculum, which is about content and the way it's being transacted. We are going to live in a world which is going to be disrupted multiple times, because I keep saying it, that if the sense of this world is that if you look at in the past, between one innovation and another innovation, the time gap was 300 years, 400 years. Now, if you look today, every 3 months, there's a disruption in the environment. More so because the way, human greed has been so intense that we have also marginalized ourselves by compromising the nature, by compromising, the planet, and also leaving these coming generations with multiple challenges. So for me, the school curriculum must think about certain enduring competencies that must be developed in the schools to manage future disruptions, whether COVID or something else. We may be hit by multiple, disruptions in different ways. The nature and the context and the ferocity will be different. So what are those enduring competencies which school curriculum must embed, and we must work towards it? It is about wisdom skills. Knowledge is something, but wisdom is something different. So we must be in a position that our curriculum creates the provisions to develop those wisdom skills. We must develop the behaviors and attitudes towards lifelong learning. Now, what is that lifelong learning? How it is possible? How do you create the necessary mindset, behaviors to be a lifelong learner? We must have meta skilling. When one learning helps you to, learn in the most challenging situations. We must have learning orientation. We must have startup mindset. If you don't have this startup mindset, we will always have scarcity in mind. We live in the most abundant times. I keep saying it, that this is the time when one person has a power to influence and change. So children must be, that mindset of I will be employed. No, I will generate employment. So it's a startup mindset. We must have higher purpose of learning, stewardship. Unless you don't build these core competencies, enduring competencies in your future curriculum, you will keep suffering and struggling to manage the disruptions. So school curriculum per se is not the only source of learning for children. It's an, iceberg model of education. You see the tip 10%. The 90% learning is underneath. It has a social context, it has spiritual context. Where is the evidence for that learning to take place? So we must start deeper introspection about the way education is being transacted, and are we preparing for the children for the future disruptions? So mere content domain knowledge, mere certain skills in transacting curriculum is not going to suffice. So we may have to redefine this educational landscape. We may have to move beyond. And also remember that education cannot be now chained inside this box, because this child is the part of the larger learning space. This is the whole cosmos, the whole universe where learning is going to be. And therefore, I think as education changes, while mandating themselves in terms of regulatory compliances, curriculum compulsions, and board compulsions, I think to define your futuristic landscape, I think we must, embark, and we must, we must give ourselves a promise that in order to be relevant, and in order to give these children a life and to face the future with confidence, then these enduring competencies must become a central part of our curriculum transaction inside the classroom. And, that's how we can, really serve the generation very well.
Thank you, Dr. Vasil. In fact, that was going to be my question to you, that what opportunities are there in this landscape for policymakers and for service providers like you? I'm glad you already answered that. I also agree with you that when we are defining competencies, as CBSE is doing right now, that I was listening to Mr. Manoj Ahuja's session yesterday. He is talking of moving towards a competency-based education, but how far are those competencies broad enough to incorporate the universal values, the sustainable development values? It's not going to be only linked to math and science and to say, okay, I need to learn this particular competency to get to the level A1 and A3. So we are hoping that when the policymakers come out with the new curriculum document, one, it will not be so broad in topics, but it'll be broader in its approach and perspective, and probably less curriculum.
We have to be wary of these short-term, prescriptions. I always call them, they are prescription to paralysis. If you look at it, when the comprehensive evaluation was introduced, what happened there? Did we improve our assessments? Have they become credible in some ways? If that is the case, why are we still struggling to conduct these board exams? Where is the validation of internal assessments? So therefore, what's important is that, education, every stakeholder counts here. It cannot be top-down approach. In India today, suppose on learning, let us say, even if it's a mandate, but are we ready for it? Do we have sufficient resources, infrastructure? In world, as I'm speaking to you, 700, I think 6 million children don't have access to any device and internet.
Sure.
And, by having these small number of schools who are affluent in terms of their infrastructure resources, we cannot draw a conclusion that the entire student population in India is so privileged. The government schools, where is the accountability for government schools for their outcomes? Now, you see, the question here is why we have at every terminal level examination to prove that they have achieved, they have learned. How is that school internal evaluation is not being validated as a credible evidence of child's learning outcomes or performance? Right. So these are larger issues, and problem with our educators. See, education in India, unfortunately, it's not about any individual, but I'm saying it as a passionate educator, having lived in this space, that leadership in education has been by default in India. We have not designed this leadership. Now, people like Roshan, who are young, enterprising, with an abundance mindset, thinking afresh, they will find themselves choked when it comes to a generation of ours who have a natural limitation of not understanding this flow and process. And what happens then, the talent that comes to education, they get frustrated.
So let's ask Roshan about it. Roshan, what do you have to say to that?
Well, it's all about a balance. I hope that a fresh, young perspective can add something, but actually, I have to respectfully disagree in the sense that I think the experience that comes with the generation that Dr. Vasil is referring to is incredibly valuable, and these two things need to be combined. So I don't purport to have all the answers at all. Rather, I learn a massive amount from the more experienced generation. And I think marrying the ideas that come with experience and new thinking go together well. And that is probably the best way to to exploit the opportunities that are going to come out here. I mean, there is a whole new landscape for sure. There's a whole new way of doing things. And as I touched upon in my previous answer, I think most importantly, the structure of educational delivery, the pedagogy effectively, has proven to be something that can evolve in India. I think right now the majority of India has been focused on a very didactic education delivery model. It's primarily chalk and talk. There's not much emphasis on skills of students beyond learning the facts associated with their subject. I think this whole experience of online learning, at least at CMS and at a lot of schools that I'm aware of too, has thrown open the doors of asynchronous learning, of project-based learning, of research-driven learning, of flipped learning, blended learning. And I think previously we'd all sort of heard of these terms, but they were just fancy buzzwords that people like to talk about in conferences and whatever, but no one was truly implementing. I think this thing has perhaps forced a lot of people to truly implement these ways of working and has demonstrated the benefits on students' learning outcomes. It's suddenly shown how rapidly students are able to learn, how they are able to enjoy learning in a different way, how they're able to apply their minds to their learning in a way that they were not doing before. And I think that that's such an important thing to keep in mind and to keep in the future. You know, we can talk about a grand vision for education you know, in years to come. But I think it's also very important to talk about what's realistic as the next steps. You know, everyone likes to talk about how we want to revolutionize education, and all of that is absolutely important, and I totally agree. And I hope, you know, to play a part in that over coming decades. But we need to also think about the here and now and what is a realistic next step. And I feel that the next step is integrating these new pedagogical techniques that we've learned from the online learning experience into the offline and normal classroom setting. I think where the rest of the ecosystem needs to come in, you know, policymakers, they need to recognize that. And I think basically what needs to happen is further deregulation into the sector, because right now the private schooling sector is so heavily regulated that it stifles room for experimentation and moving out of the norm. I think a lot of deregulation is needed just to give more autonomy to schools. There's a huge amount of evidence internationally and indeed within India to some extent that demonstrates that, you know, giving more autonomy to schools combined with you know, good forms of output-based accountability is a very viable way of improving outcomes. And I think that's something that needs to happen. And I think it's high time now that the exam boards, the CBSE has already started taking steps in this direction. The ICSE needs to do this, and the CBSE needs to do more. The exam boards need to evolve their examination system so that it is not so heavily rote learning focused. We've been talking about this for years, but now again, this online learning experience has thrown that open and has made it less of a buzzword and made it a reality. And now is the time for the exam system to recognize that and design questions which are application-based and understanding-based, which is really what's going to prepare students for the world that faces them ahead, this adapting, changing, evolving world that faces them very soon.
Very right. Absolutely. Especially on the financial and the regulatory aspect.
Vandana, I would like to just come in and add, if it's
yes,
okay.
Please, Sonam.
I agree with Dr. Vasil, what you have just mentioned about how the assessments and learning has to go beyond the classroom, beyond the rigorous curriculum that has been followed. And I think schools, there has to be a systemic change in the education in India. We have to inculcate, we have to introduce 21st century learning skills, because we need to get our children. It's important to get them get ready. There should be a readiness in terms of problem solving, critical thinking, you know, getting them to explore. And all these skills enables the child for a holistic development. And rightly what Roshan mentioned about, you know, if schools across, we are so highly regulated, and if we get some amount of autonomy to come and come in there and create curriculums that will benefit in terms of teaching learning for better outcomes and get children evolve as individuals and be more confident, and in terms of life skills, it will be far better and worthwhile.
That's true. Dr. Neelam, may I ask you a question? While, like Roshan said, it's good to have revolutionary ideas. You're looking at a range of affiliation boards from IB to CBSE to state board. So how do you really see technology being, implemented across all these while adhering to their norms and considering that finances could be a concern, especially for the fee collection with the kind of parents that you have in these schools?
Yeah, thank you, Vandana. And what happened in IB, the class, the DP, the class which graduated 2020. Now this class, when they graduated, there were no formal exams. And I heard Dr. Siva, the Director General, talking about the changes which she thinks the future school should have. She talked about the skill development as part of the teaching learning. To make the education more holistic. And one concern was for the assessment. The assessment, we have to shift from formative assessment, like from summative assessment, to a kind of a formative assessment. So the assessment has to be a continuous process, like what CBSE has also been talking about, the CCE. Because there has to be, the learning has to be meaningful every day, every hour, every minute. To make that happen, the teachers have to be equipped how to handle the class, how to handle those students in that 40 minutes or 35 minutes or an hour, because that is the basic skill required. We talk about like achieving a lot of things as educators, and with our experience, we want to achieve more, but the people who really can make it happen, they are our teachers. And they have to be all the time, their skills have to be upgraded, their confidence has to be up. So the technology is very handy in those situations. Like with technology, like what we learned in the last 3 months, maybe this IT revolution was like especially in the education sector. It was not possible in India if we thought like 6 months back. But how it kick-started, because the necessity made it happen. Everyone started learning like that, and they started experimenting and finding new ways how to tackle that. So I strongly recommend a model of experiential learning. When we talk about assessments, we are propounders of experiential learning. And if you look at historically, like our Vedic education, which we can trace back it to 1100 BC, when we had Nalanda universities. And so the basic edifice of the education was erected on the principle of holistic learning, which was very, very beautifully, we can say, complemented by experiential learning. A very good example is like Eklavya. Now, how did Eklavya learn? He learned with experience. And if in the modern terms, I have to explain what experiential learning is, like it's just like if you have to ride a bicycle. So a child gets hold of a bicycle, he experiences that. That means that is his own experience, and he doesn't know how to ride bicycle. And then he goes back and understands, he reflects on the observation, like what he experienced while he was trying to understand how it goes. Then he is reflecting on his observation, and then in his mind he is trying to find a solution to that. That is what we call as he is in an abstract form, he's trying to conceptualize how will he do it better next time. So, and then he actively experiments, he writes it again. So that means what he's reflecting on it and then redoing it. Here, the role of facilitator can be there, and it may not be there if the learner himself is really enthused. But facilitator can make this teaching learning process a lasting learning, because that's what we need. We need to move away from, like what Dr. Vasil said, what Sona, even Roshan said, that when we are combining different modes of learning, but the lastful learning will happen if that experience is that meaningful. If the experience is not meaningful, we learn many things by rote and didactic approach, but we forget them as well. So then is another component of social emotional learning, which can be started, we can start as early as 3 years in our kindergarten classes. So the maximum learning in this context of social emotional learning takes place in those early years. So our teachers have to be trained to incorporate those qualities in the child when the child is totally receptive. That's the time he is raw, he's not polluted, his mind is fresh. And that's the time when we have to move from the curriculum or the disciplinary studies to have some kind of exposure which makes him later also emotionally more resilient. And that's what the world needs. We need the future generation to be more emotionally resilient. So we adopted some program on SEL in collaboration with Yale Center of Learning. So which we have started doing that in our control group of 40 schools. We are doing it, and the 40 schools we are not doing it. And we are going to publish that study maybe in this year, very soon. So we could see that the small children, if he understands like what he went through, how could he share the pain? If the other child is not feeling well and he gives him a hug and he feels better, so he puts his mood above. Like earlier it is in gray zone and now it's in pink zone. So these little things will create a better citizen for tomorrow. Like what Dr. Vasil said, this pandemic is just one of its kind. We will have many. So, but then our children have to survive this. And for their survival, so we have to give them this coping style of like understanding. Their attributional style has to be like that. In psychology, they teach that, like, what is attributional style? What is a coping style? Where is your focus of control? That how do you reframe the outcome of an event in a positive way? Outcome will be there. There may not be all good outcomes. And the more we learn from it is that, like what he said about like something kind of survival, the survival skills. So those things can be built in. If the educators, they take a call, and the structured curriculum, we are like made to innovate, and our own curriculum, the way we think it has to be, because we need to embed all this thing in our day-to-day learning. Now, the events like what we call, like I was talking about, spiritual intelligence, which is a very recent component which has come up now, which is maybe it encompasses everything. Now, spiritual intelligence is transformative intelligence. It is something which unfolds the potential which is within that child. The modern education has made him see only the market influences. Like he is like trained to only cherish material, but he's never made to understand that there is something, is a deep qualities within him. So his consciousness, those qualities, the values which are deeply ingrained in consciousness, they need to be unearthed. So that means our day-to-day curriculum, we have to weave our curriculum in a context when we put all these together. The component of social emotional learning, the emotional quotient, the spiritual intelligence, the gratitude, the gratefulness, the humility. Now, all these things, if it's embedded into his psyche, he will be able to survive everything. And every other, the catastrophe which are happening around the world. But for that, I think we have to start early. One thing is there. And this embedding model, each school system, they do it in different ways and means. They have those eco clubs, they have service clubs, they have an action, they take some action also. The people go and volunteer, they are driven by some kind of philanthropy. But that, more than an activity, it has to be embedded into the psyche of the child. So that is, I think, the need is for the curriculum. The curriculum has to be recoined and redesigned in a manner which is incorporating all these features into it. And we have to dare, like, dare to make these changes. If it doesn't work this way, we make it work another way, we coin some other name. But these activities only will hold him, make him more mindful, make him more soulful, make him more peaceful. Because this technology boom has made the child completely distracted. His attention is fractured at this moment. It's in a complete mess. A child of 9-year-old child or an 8-year-old child, older child, he knows more about like whatever, maybe in our times, a person didn't know all those things. Maybe by the age of 30, he didn't know, but he knows all those things. Now that information which he is getting, now how to understand that information, how to make use of that information for the betterment of his own self, then we need to integrate all these activities. And if you look at all the old universities, maybe it's Cambridge, maybe it's Oxford, maybe it's Harvard, all these schools started as like there were schools of theology where they were talking about religion first, because that is what they were integrating spirituality into it, the spirit of humanity into it. Because until and unless we do not have those characteristics inbuilt in the child, he will not be able to hold himself. So we need to sensitize him to the pain and suffering. So it's not the survival of the fittest, what Darwin taught us. Maybe it's now the survival of the kindest. And for that, we have to reframe everything. And the technology is not our master. Technology is our maybe a help or a support system. It cannot lead us, because the big picture which the youngsters get today is that everything can be done with technology. Everything is possible with technology. So the value of relationships, the respect for the teacher as such has to be respected. All those things, they do not mean that much for him. So the need is to have a robust type of a curriculum, which is like a dynamic one, vibrant one, and which is incorporating all these dimensions which I've talked about. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Neelam. That was passionate and very true. So technology is, I would say, an enabler to deliver our curriculum, to also develop skills. Technology is not going away, nor do we want it to go away, because it's a skill which is required in 21st century, as much as we require a strong foundation of ethics and values, like you said. I'll come back to the topic to, yes, Dr. Vasil, you wanted
to reinforce what Neelam said. I think let us all understand, if education is preparation for life, that is what education is all about. It's preparing us for life, and we have been told, and we live with this belief. Then all life has to be education oriented, and all education has to be life oriented.
True.
I'm making a very profound statement. If education is a preparation for life, then all life has to be education oriented, and all education has to be life oriented. The moment you have this balance and mix, all our problems will be solved. The problem today is disconnect. Unless you don't connect education to life, you know, it brings many, many issues. It is not the forum where we would like to explain. But if we live with this primary thought that education has to be connected with life and life has to be connected with the education, then our schools will never fail us. There is a great educator, John Hattie, one of the most respected education in the world. His book on visible learning, which is a really profound doctrine on education. He says in his book, this visible learning, the most powerful single modification that can enhance the performance is the feedback. So therefore, if we have the ability, to manage this and accept it and take corrections, we will be better off.
I'd come to, thank you, Dr. Vasil. Sonal ma'am, would you like to tell us, we all know that with the changes that have happened, it's almost a behavioral change, especially in the teachers, and a positive one. People who are hesitating to use technology for better outcomes. I'm not saying using technology for the sake of it, just to say I'm playing a PowerPoint or I'm playing an animation, but rather using technology for lifelong learning, for improving, for their own professional development, because we all know teachers are time poor. Do you think change schools should now be looking at a very structured approach to enhancing teacher capability through in-service programs? Because there is pretty much nothing we can do unless we are in the government to change the model of teacher education as they come to you. But after they come to you, are you looking at some models of really enhancing their capability to meet the new situations?
Yes, Vandana, we are looking at that, because at RINES, we've always believed that teachers need to be constantly trained and motivated to get them ready for all different types of opportunities that arise over time. And this pandemic has created that kind of opportunity. And our teachers have been constantly upgrading, while they've been constantly upgrading their skills to manage the new learning methodologies, we've had structured programs of upskilling our teachers. And it's an ongoing process. And we, with special emphasis on online class delivery, because for this, the teachers, even however great they might be, in terms of their content, specialized in their subject, there's a new skill sets required to deliver in an online environment. And when the lockdown was announced around the end of March, we started training our teachers and got them to be equipped first, and so that they could be more efficient and effective in curriculum delivery. And in the process, what we have observed that a lot of teachers who would usually work behind the scenes have emerged and are our new champion teachers, the technology leaders, and go-to person. And we've seen a new teacher leader group emerging out of this, and they're specialized in the skill sets. And while we have been observing that, there is a collaborative learning teaching within the teaching environment, within the teacher fraternity, and which I think is good. It's very refreshing. And there's a lot of the teachers had to unlearn, learn, and relearn during this time. And while they have been doing that, so yes, we definitely believe that upskilling is the new normal for all teachers. And while they are looking at developing in their professional growing in their professional development, we are also encouraging our teachers, because you have a pool of talent across, and how we use and how we channelize this pool of talent is very important. And so we've been encouraging our teachers, in addition to their professional development, to also extend in their personal growth, and almost like an extension of who they are. So be it using technology platforms, whether it's being, writing blogs related to education, or even in things that interest them. Also in terms of creating content, because that is something which is very, very essential in today's time, and it will grow in a greater measure. In addition to that, while we always focus on the mental health and emotional well-being of students, we are teaching and encouraging our teachers to have and maintain mental state of mind and being mindful, because it's been a very difficult and challenging time for teachers across, and to kind of adapt to this new change. Yes, like at RINES, we have our learning management system in place, our portals in place, but in the last 3 months, we have seen an exponential increase in terms of the usage of it and using technology in a greater measure. And so, so the mental well-being of a teacher is very important, because there's a lot for a teacher to adapt to this new change. And we've seen teachers being very proactive, very creative in creating, bringing out their creative learning and also sharing information among teachers across our branches. And I really want to take this opportunity, this platform of, we're very thankful, and grateful to God. We have an excellent team of staff across the country at Ryan's, and teachers across have been doing a tremendous amount of work, support. They have really risen high above this entire situation and the occasion, and are continuing to strive and continuing to deliver better and coming out with new ideas, new learning strategies, and bringing in all that on the table so that everybody else will benefit. And yes, if I may say that, if the upskilling of teachers is going to be the new normal, yes, it will be, because it's going to completely help the teacher in their overall growth, in their overall professional learning. And that is something that will enhance the growth among the teachers, and which will be very, very good. And with tremendous support from our sir, Chairman Sir and Ma'am, I really want to appreciate all our teachers, for doing an amazing job and taking up that responsibility. It's not been easy. It's not been an easy ride at all. But they've embraced it well, and we're very grateful.
Thank you. That's very generous of you to give credit where it's due to all your teachers. Why I ask this question is because while we talk of a new form of curriculum, as Dr. Neelam said, as we spoke about, I would say the flexibility in curriculum, the social, emotional, technological, everything. The curriculum can only be transacted by a teacher, whether the teacher is online or the teacher is in the classroom. It's really important to focus on that aspect, because all of us have very little control over that also. What actually, it is difficult to standardize what is happening. So my next question there is something which was sent to us by parents also, and I decided to include it. They are seeing a lot of movement, I would say, which is saying that why not homeschool your children? You know the best, you know what curriculum is, a lot of digital resources available. Should we or should we not homeschool our students rather than sending them out? Now that, like Dr. Neelam said, they're sitting with the children, they know what's happening in the classroom. We've had some parents talking about it in Bangalore, where they feel that, they can homeschooling can do a better job of it. Would you like to talk about that, Sonal ma'am? Again.
Sure. See, homeschooling is an acceptable norm of providing learning and is prevalent in the educational system in the US and many parts of Europe. Now, there are few factors that needs to be looked at. One is the greater discipline on part of the parents, which is required. And, children have to have and follow through a preset schedule for stability of learning in children. Second thing is infrastructure. Homeschooling involves usage of online resources and has today broadband connectivity, desktop, laptops in household is still an evolving process in India per se. Learning content. While there are a lot of online content available, the efficacy of the content as an alternate to regular schooling is still an evolving debate. And lastly, the compliance and acceptability by relevant authorities within the government to recognize this form of education. Because if it's not going to be an accepted norm, then what? Then what will be the next thing, And so I think, yes, one can look at and explore the option, but it still in India per se, India specific, I think it still needs to evolve. There needs to be a lot of dialogue. There needs to be a lot of discussions that needs to be, that needs to have in this, particularly with homeschooling. So a lot of factors to be taken into account here.
Okay, thank you. Roshan, I'd transit into you with an extension of that. A lot of parents of pre-primary children especially are thinking of keeping their children out of the school system because they feel half the year is gone, might as well keep the child home. What do you have to say to that? Do you really think that would work when the children try to come back into the formal school?
Frankly, I think it would be a great shame if parents kept their younger children back. I think in general, there has always been a problem that parents place less value on the pre-primary education generally, not just now, but even before the lockdown, even before the virus. And that's been a problem, and now it's even more of a problem because, as you rightly say, parents have been talking about this, that is there any point in sending their children back, or should I keep them at home? It would be a great shame because there's so much more to schooling at all levels, and particularly at the pre-primary level, than simply learning a curriculum. I mean, the whole experience of schooling is such a valuable part of the child's development at the younger age. It's so important for them to have those human interactions, to make friends, to develop a peer group, and to be in that community environment. And it's very important that they're able to do projects and work in a manner which is quite well structured. It can't really be randomized. And the other issue with homeschooling, I think, is that it's the opposite of an equalizer. Rather, the quality of delivery in different homes can vary massively. And especially if we think of the experience of a school like ours at CMS, we pride ourselves on being affordable in the sense of giving access to a wide variety of people. And in the same class, we have the children of large business owners or IAS officers, and we have the children of rickshaw pullers and sweepers. And they get equal access to quality education in the classroom. And the children of the less well-off parents, those parents are sacrificing because they understand the value of education and they're willing to somehow, pay the fee to get their children that education, but they know that they will not be able to necessarily provide the same service in their home. So it's very important that children, have that equalizing platform to learn together in a school environment. So I hope that parents will not be taking their pre-primary students out. We will certainly be making an effort to engage pre-primary parents and indeed all parents very closely in counseling and in explaining to them the importance of keeping their child engaged with the school process. And I'm skeptical about the potential of homeschooling in the current scenario.
Vandana, please unmute yourself.
Vandana, you're on mute.
All right. While I know it's 1:20 already, I have my eye on that. I would still like to put in a couple of questions before we summarize. One is to Dr. Neelam from the interior of Haryana. There is somebody who's saying there is no connectivity, they don't have enough devices at home. So in such a scenario, what is the best way the child can continue studying?
Yeah, thank you, Vandana. I think this question appears to be original and very real in the terms of the feedback which they are sharing truly. Now, in this context, what Sonal said, because we have to move towards this transition in the terms of kind of a blended learning or where we have to call the children back to the school as soon as we can and as soon as the situation improves. Because unless they are not back in the school, technology, this transition which is overtaken by technology cannot be complete. So, and in the meantime, the only thing is they have to seek or take the help or support of the people who can lend them some device, or they can continue with the online education. But I think we educators and the government policy has to be redesigned in the manner that by staggered, we have to call our children back in the school. It may be, there are different models for that. And we will have to experiment that, maybe if not this month, and let's see how the disease gets better, maybe over the next 6 to 8 weeks. The children have to be back in the school. To begin with, maybe a staggered model, have a small bubble experiment of calling less children and of higher classes, and then taking it back to the middle school, and then the primary, and last of all, the kindergarten. So that question will remain unanswered until and unless this thing is not in our hands. So this remains unanswered. Yeah.
As a publisher, I would probably say continue to read your books, continue with your textbooks, workbooks. It's worked for us for centuries. It's not something we are putting away quickly. I would not want to sum up anything here. I would request Dr. Vasil to please give us a few insights from this session. And then I want to play a little video, which is messages from teachers and students for all of you. So Dr. Vasil, would you please be kind enough to sum this up?
I'm sure that, everyone has a sense of future in some ways, whichever geography or wherever they operate. So as educators, it's like this. If the whole world is pursuing something which we genuinely believe is not right, can schools then have the similar kind of adoption? No, schools have a different mandate. Schools will remain critical for the survival of humanity. Schools are not meant only to transact a curriculum. They are also transform students into good human beings. So therefore, I think whatever we do, the ultimate purpose, that I always say the kingpin of this relationship is the child. If you believe those enduring competencies are important for this child to create a safer world for himself and for generations to come, then we cannot be myopic. We should not close our mind. It is not a game of profit and loss. It's a game of continuity. And if you want this continuity on a spectrum where there is well-being, welfare, compassion, kindness, then what we said, everything else should work towards it. Whether you use technology as an enabler and a support, or whether you use technology to transform the entire landscape, human is central to this whole relationship. You see, man has created a machine, but man should not give ability to machine to create him. He has to run supreme. Because at the end of the day, human intelligence is much superior than machine. Machine can do certain jobs today better than humans, but it cannot replace human mind because he's the creator. The nature has designed humans for learning. And we should not incapacitate ourselves. We should not handicap ourselves from that. So if we are designed to learn, then I'm sure that we will learn to overcome these crises very well. Again, as you rightly put it, that India, the bandwidth of technology and access to technology is something which will take some time. So a blend is equally important. I keep saying it, textbook is still a good source of resource with the teacher in a remote part of the, India, or even in the cities as such. So let us not, give up on these things. Let us keep using them to the best and help child to grow till such time that tomorrow we don't have the physical print of textbooks, but it's in some other form. And I'm sure that all people like Macmillan and many other people who are in this journey of enhancing value to education are quite alive to this situation, and they're working towards it. It's about developing skill sets, having a right balance, and creating a mindset of abundance. And I'm sure that change with even limited mandate internally, where we are not regulated in terms of our competencies, skill sets. Say teacher training is an evolutionary process. It is not one quick fix. If I say I'm giving teachers training and it's complete, no, because every generation has a different learning style. They pose different sets of problems. Therefore, it has to be evolutionary. In doing so, it's about need versus want. It must be built in the culture of organization that training is, central to our life here. So therefore, I think it's buying into this belief that if learning is continuous, so is training necessary, continuous and evolving. I'm sure that given this pandemic, the chains have definitely worked hard to see that the flow of education is interrupted. and everyone has a sincere intention of helping child to move forward. I'm sure that in this whole ball game, I would say we must celebrate teachers for their accepting the challenge and creating a state of readiness, because they're at different levels. They're at variance in terms of their skill set when it comes to use of technology. I mean, I'm one of them. I'm not a very tech savvy because it came very late in our lives. Yet the only things we had the courage to accept it and not negate it, its influence. So therefore, teachers must be celebrated across. And my heart goes out to them, because, and also it's important for people to understand, when teachers work online, we respect them. They're in the office. They're not at home. Their own personal space, their own personal well-being does not get compromised. We have the same trust when they're in the school or when they're working online. So those are some of the behavioral changes and protocols we must have in place. And we must recognize, the leadership must recognize this, because I have teachers who have worked more than normal working hours and yet being questioned because they're working in silos. We are normally used into the inclusive environment. We believe when people are in front of us, work takes place. So we have to now realize that it's not necessary you have to have a physical presence. You can still be active, working and supporting and providing valuable service, even being distant. So but thank you, Vanda, for this opportunity. It's always great to interact with people of like-mindedness who have the similar passion, and I genuinely salute them, those who are working in the remote areas, because they are the ones who should be celebrated. They are our heroes. Thank you.
Vandana, will you permit me to say yeah.
In fact, I was going to say no bye-bye yet. We are still on. Yes.
So
Thank
one
you.
is that I want to thank you for all the books which have been delivered at door by Macmillan. So all the children, they have their books in their hands, and it's not an easy task considering that they're all remote locations. So we really value you for that and supporting us in this time, and even giving us good teacher training sessions also. And before, like Dr. Wasil said, and I really, it was wonderful hearing to Dr. Wasil and Sonal and Rohan. But one thing which I want to again say and repeat is that we need to have a revised kind of a curriculum, a philosophy of how to run a school. It has to be that weave has to be created to build the emotional resilience, the social emotional learning, the experiential learning, and to develop the spiritual intelligence in the child. Because at the end of the day, the positive thinking, the way each cell of our body is governed by the mind, and mind is governed by the thoughts. But if we have the positive thoughts, so the man is not victim of hereditary, but man is he is controlling his mind. So very, very important for our child or the youth to understand that he is not victim of circumstances. He can reframe, redesign the outcomes in a better way so that he is at ease. Because everything, whatever we do is like we've already discussed, it is for his benefit, the benefit of the child and the youth. So until and unless we don't teach him those how to preserve himself, that will be a continuous challenge and an innovation how we weave our curriculum, which has to be, whether it's an Ebola pandemic, whether it's any other pandemic which happened just in 2014. Now what happened is in West Africa, those girls where their attendance was maybe 10%, but after Ebola, it again crashed. And they were made into, they were the high incidence of the teen pregnancies, the child abuse, the sexual abuse. Now, these are the things whenever, now, where is the way, where is the answer to all this? The answer is, I think, in our hands, in our minds, that we need, like the child can control. He is the one who can mind his thoughts. So that empowerment has to be given, and that has to be given when we integrate all these things into our curriculum.
Thank you, Dr. Neil. Roshan, would you like to also have your closing statement, please?
Yeah, sure. I think there's been a lot of very interesting thoughts shared on this panel. I've learned a lot from hearing from my fellow panelists, so I thank them all very much for that. Just to reiterate the key, some of my key thoughts. I think the most important thing that has come out of this crisis and the experience that everyone has gained is that new ways of teaching are possible and they are effective, and they must continue hereafter. So effective use of technology is one thing, but only when it's in the hands of a skilled teacher, and the skilled teacher must be engaged with new pedagogy and must emphasize skills that are relevant to the 21st century. That includes research skills, analytical skills, and that can be achieved through the new pedagogies which are already emerging as a result of this crisis, project-based learning and flipped learning, and many more, including new ways of doing assessment. Apart from that, I echo a statement that Sonal made earlier about teachers being lifelong learners. And I think this really highlights the importance and value of continuous professional development for teachers, which is something that I hope is expanded upon and emphasized across the education sector. And I hope that there are realization amongst policymakers of the need to deregulate, and a realization amongst exam board authorities of the need to evolve their examination system to capture the new pedagogical reality.
Thank you, Roshan. So much clarity. Thank you. Sonal ma'am, over to you. You're on mute, ma'am. Thank you.
Like the other panelists have already summed it up, I would just also want to add in there, while the schools are taking the responsibility and working out and preparing for the reopening of schools, I also believe that it is also our parents' community that also play an important role in this entire journey. And while the remote learning has been ongoing, and it will continue to, it's here to stay on for a long. And while that keeps happening, we're going to see parents, and I believe that parents should also monitor and keep their children engaged, and monitoring children, because the use of technology does have its drawbacks as well. And we already see, like Dr. Neelam highlighted about the child abuse, and it's very prevalent and it's increasing dramatically through the internet. And this is something that as parents, we should always monitor the usage of technology, because it will, if that doesn't happen, we've seen the after effects of what it does to a child. And also as schools, we also have to remember and prepare ourselves that as the pandemic subsides and schools reopen, there will be a lot of children who will be in a state of affected mental health because of the situation. We've always been talking about how adults have been affected, but the children also have been largely affected. And understanding their emotional well-being and getting them to dialogue, and the counselors come in there largely in helping out these children, because the loss of their loved ones during this crisis, isolation also has affected them largely. So a lot of these things has to be kept in mind, and as educators and school leaders, we have to take this into account and be better prepared. And also, I would just like to highlight there and sum it up there, while Dr. Neelam said about how spiritual well-being is also an integral part of the learning now for a child. And I truly agree with that, because children have to be spiritually connected, and we have to teach them to connect with God, and to be of a stable mind, to have the peace, to have compassion, to have the kindness, because of the things that they are at their age are facing like in India itself, in a matter of 3 months, you've seen of the different things and situations we had to that has affected us, be it cyclone, be it earthquake, be it different things around. And so we have to make sure that we teach our children to be spiritual, to be humble, teach them values, and all that comes into the integral part of the learning. So I ended up and sum it up with this. And I just want to say thank you for giving me this opportunity again.
Thank you very much, ma'am. So on behalf of Macmillan, I'll say thank you, but I'm still going to play the video, and do watch it. And we hope to meet you in school after that.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. One sec, I think I've...
Where is my school bag? I really want to go to school. Do I look happy?
Can you all see it?
I'm missing my school. I'm missing my friends and the games I play with them.
Yes, no. I just want to tell you what I miss about.
Here we are.
Where is my school bag? I really want to go to school. Do I look happy? No, I'm missing my school. I'm missing my friends and the games I play with them.
Dear students, I just want to tell you what I miss about you the most is your smile. I miss the playtime, the debates, your enthusiasm, break time, fun time. I miss us.
I miss my teachers and friends. And I miss all the fun and all the wonderful things that teacher teaches me. I miss school because school is the best.
I have collected a big bag of stories for all of you. I want to meet all of you soon and share all the stories.
Of course, I miss the expression on the faces of my students. Some so inquisitive, some so engrossed, and some ready with a question always.
I like online classes, but I'm missing my friends. That's why I want to go back to school. I miss my teachers. I miss my friends. I miss my books.
Miss my school and my best friends for all the fun adventures we had, like all the pranks we pulled.
What I miss the most about school is seeing the expressions of my students in class when I crack a joke or when I tell them they have to submit a 1,000-word essay the next day.
And I want to go back because I want to be around them. I miss their chatter, their laughter, and their fooling around.
I really do miss my classroom and the amount of energy that the kids physically bring with them and the excitement of them actually telling me their stories.
I've really started to miss my school, mainly because of the face-to-face interactions that I got to have at school.
I'm missing my students a lot. Greeting each other, hustle bustle of the school, going to a noisy class of 40 students, and how they would become quiet and study with me.
I'm missing my friends, my classroom, my teachers.
The laughter of my dear students, the sound of the school bell, the smell of the chalks, and the smell of canteen food.
विद्यालय के विषय में जो मैं सबसे ज्यादा याद करती हूँ वो है मेरे बच्चों के मुस्कुराते हुए चेहरे।
मैम स्कूल जा सकते हैं, मैम टीचर से मिल पा सकते हैं, मैम फ्रेंड से मिल पा सकते हैं।
I want my daughter to go back to her school because I want her to have access to books, attend classes with her friends.
We need some textbooks and workbooks for reinforcement. Otherwise, children cannot follow what is being taught online.
I miss my books.
I really wish I could go back to school really soon and have fun once again.
I soon want to go back to school.
Can't wait to get back to that.
It's priceless and I really miss it.
I miss them all and hope to see them soon.
Thank you, everyone. That's all I'll say. Thank you for your time, for your insights, for being with us. It was such a pleasure. And we're going to come back and meet you physically in schools now. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.